Craft on Tap, where we talk about growth marketing for RIAs. And today we're going to talk about financial advisor launch kits and how we help advisors transition through a business change, such as launching their own RIA, joining an existing RIA, maybe joining a TAMP, some kind of move like that, where from a marketing communication standpoint, we can help. I am Stephen Beach, your host, and my co-host Faustin Weber's with me. I wanted to just talk first and just kind of tell the story about how we got into the space, kind of our background as a firm, and what brought us here. I do feel like we're a little more qualified to talk about change communications and marketing to support a business transition like this than some other firms might be, just because we've lived it, and that's how we were introduced to the RIA space in the first place. So I'll rewind about 15 years, 14 years, and just say, that my wife and I started Craft. We before that we were just freelancers. We were living the nomadic lifestyle. This is pre-kids, living the dream. Working on Wi-Fi from wherever we wanted, going to all of our friends' weddings, traveling a lot, etc. And so I was a sales rep previous to that, and I came from that background where I needed to start generating my own leads through marketing. So I kind of taught myself inbound marketing. And then my wife Tracy, she came from a journalism background. She had her master's in journalism from Medill at Northwestern, and she was working with a firm on change communications. They had a lot of acquisitions, merger activity that they needed help with to kind of communicate both internally and externally, to their employees and to their stakeholders and to their clients, what the change was going to be, what it meant for them, why this was an exciting thing, or kind of, whatever the story was there. She was helping with that. So Tracy kind of had this background in change communications. I had this background in sales turned inbound marketing, and we've been running that agency for 6, 7 years. That brings us to COVID. And so COVID hits. mm, we'll just keep it in the family for this story. My brother-in-law was a recruiter at Ameriprise. So he's trying to bring practices and advisors into Ameriprise. During COVID, he says to Tracy and I, he says, "Hey, I'm going to leave Ameriprise. I'm going to do my own thing. I want to go independent. I want to be firm agnostic and help people, either change broker dealers, launch their own RIA, join an existing RIA, consider different TAMP offerings. There's 1,000 options out there, and it's really confusing. And a lot of advisors don't know the land. They can't see the landscape like a third party recruiter can. They just don't have that perspective. And so he says, I'm going to do this independently. And what I want you guys to do is help me with the marketing and the communications that you've been doing for other companies. Because when an advisor decides to make this move, whichever of those business changes it is, there's 100 things they have to do. There's legal work, there's compliance work. There's a million things to do. You might need to find your own space to rent, etc. So one thing that we can take off of their plate that would be a value add for me as a recruiter would be all the marketing and the change work, right? So the things you've been doing already, he says, the messaging, the branding, the videos, the PR, the website design and development, the email newsletters, the social media, etc. We can do all of that for these advisors who are launching their own thing or making a big move somewhere. And what we'll do is we will just offer that for free to the advisor. The firm where they land will pay us. They pay a placement fee to the recruiter, and out of that fee, we'll just offer all the marketing support for free. So that is how we got into the space with RIAs. So shout out to my brother-in-law, Boston. His real name is Boston Cardinal. Okay, I'm not making that up. I have another brother-in-law. His name is Tom Jones. So they both married my wife's sisters. So those are a couple of my brother-in-laws on that side. And so Boston now runs, Vantage Impact, it's called. He started it during COVID. We've been supporting that business and his advisory transitions since COVID. So I thank him for kind of bringing us into the space and then really like holding our hands and our team's hands, right? At that point, we probably had 6 full-time, and now we're at 10 full-time people to teach us, compliance, all the lingo. nobody knew what an IAR versus RIA was at that point. We had no idea what we were doing. We knew the marketing front. We knew the change communications. We knew how to craft a story, and make it resonate with the target audience. We just didn't know all the other stuff that comes with the industry. So anyhow, he brought us into that. So want to give a shout out to Boston Cardinal, mhm, and Vantage Impact on that. That enabled us to get our feet wet, go through the learning curve. The first two breakaways we did during COVID, so I think it was maybe June, July, August, somewhere there, 2020. We started talking with a couple of advisors. The first two breakaways we helped him with. We did this what we called a launch package, an advisor launch package. So, I had all these things that we're going to get into. We kind of knew what to do to communicate the change and make the most out of it. Um, and after we did that, we finished the communications, and they made their move, and we did the follow up. They both asked us if we would stay on to be their outsourced CMO. This is great. We've got a lot of other marketing ideas we'd love to execute on. Let's just keep going. So then we turned it into a monthly agreement, much like we had with our other clients previously. And those are our first two clients. They remain clients to this day. So we're really proud of that as far as being good partners with them this whole time. And we've helped them grow, et cetera, on their own. So that's what kind of brings us into the space. That's the quick background that I wanted to share. So that brings us to what we're getting into today. We'd like to share more about that advisor launch kit. So there's a lot of items that we go through that we should at least be considering and talking about with you as the advisor, that help us to kind of promote the change, announce it, make a big splash of it, communicate it if you need to the right people, etc. And so we're going to talk through that a little bit today. And then our hope is that you can take that information. We'll include the checklist in the show notes if you'd like to download it and so on. But take that information and then leverage it however fits your practice, right? If you have an advisor that wants to join, or you're considering acquisition, this type of thing, you'll probably be able to pull from our checklist or from the things we talk about today, to really help communicate and market through that move effectively. So that's our hope today. All right, that's my long intro. Boston, anything I missed there as far as the story goes? You came in and
I think that was really well said.
okay.
And I think one of the things that you were just talking about, there's obviously different types of affiliations, right? Different types of transitions when advisors come into, a new practice. There's advisors who are completely launching their own RIA, right? And are plugging into new custodians and plugging into potentially a TAMP. And then there's also advisors coming over as a W-2 employee to be underneath the umbrella and not necessarily bringing their book of business. And then there's more of a acquisition where an advisor will bring over the book of business and just be within the umbrella of a firm. So obviously just want to point that out, that there's different types of, transitions that advisors will make. We're, I think, going to focus more on the lines of the communications and marketing front for a practice and how they can help an advisor bringing over a new book of business. But I think even coming over as a W-2 employee, right, where they're going to be given more of a book, if they do have, clients at their past firm, I think there's a lot that can be applied here as well. And then I just wanted to plug, Vantage has a really nice, and I actually worked on this, a really nice legal and compliance checklist for advisors that are thinking about starting their own practice. And we worked with an attorney in the space named Richard Chen. Really just awesome story with Richard. He posts a lot on LinkedIn, and he helps a lot of advisors navigate all the legal pieces, right, as an attorney. So we got a really nice starting point as a checklist. We'll put that in the show notes so that if any advisors are interested, they could check on that. But really, we're going to be focusing more on the marketing front, what you would do versus the compliance checklist. And then I just wanted to say, I think, a lot of if you're joining a new TAMP or even a new firm, there's often a lot of promises about what the marketing will look like, right? I think that was a big piece of at Advantage. We were meeting with all these different advisors, advisory groups to try to build a relationship so they could potentially be a referral to the advisors coming over and joining their practice. Everyone promises strategic marketing in the transition, right? But Stephen, we've seen that with the actual, follow through on that sort of varies, right? In terms of like what marketing is offered. It's a lot of times it's just like a template that they give that they're supposed to do something with it, or like a 1-page document that then they're supposed to like build into a marketing plan. So that's why we built this checklist, right? Because it's not always sufficient. Wouldn't you say
Yeah,
that?
it's not always sufficient. And as an advisor, I mean, there's just a lot of blind spots, I think, that we're trying to illuminate. So
Yeah.
you might not know, everybody says the right things, but you just might not know, what the difference is between, A and B, as far as what they're promising. So I think and sometimes we've seen there's these big groups that have a dedicated marketing support, they'll call it. But really, there's two full-time marketing people trying to support 190 advisors. It's like, okay, well, what all can you possibly do? I mean, it's gonna be templated. It's gonna be, there's gonna be a baseline there for you. But if you want to go the extra mile, you might be a little bit more limited. I'll just say that. So we've seen
Yeah.
that quite a bit. There's also the other side, like I've seen people join these larger groups. There's an advisor here in our office that joined Savvy Wealth. We don't work with him. I just chat with him, around the water cooler kind of thing. But he's really happy with the marketing support that Savvy Wealth has provided him. And so, like you said, there's a large spectrum there as far as what you're actually getting out of the marketing support that you're paying for.
Okay, so just like anything in marketing, right, with the transition, I think it's important to establish what your goal is, right? So, in an acquisition where a client's actually going to try to bring their book over, a lot of times client retention, like bringing them over to the new practice, is a huge piece, right? Just trying to I mean, that's part of why, the firm wants to bring on the new advisor, is that they're expecting, 80%, 90%, 95% of the assets to also transfer over. So I think that's just important to make sure that you define that goal. A lot of times when an advisor joins, the firm is trying to transition a book that they already have, or like, clients that they already have, to that new advisor. So that like changes the goalpost a little bit in terms of what you're trying to do with the marketing and communications. Maybe you're trying to thread the needle and, have that advisor take on new clients and also retain all of their past clients. So I just think it's important first, before you even think about like the communications marketing front, like what are you trying to accomplish? Because then everything sort of dictates from there. And, I think this is just on a case by case basis, based on what the firm is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, what are you trying to
And then
accomplish?
obviously, like,
One other thing. What are you trying to
yeah, go
accomplish,
ahead.
and then kind of what are the guardrails or what are the limitations you might have? Because there's a large spectrum
Yeah.
of what you are able to do versus not. Yeah, I think we don't claim to be transition consultants, like my brother-in-law
Yeah.
Boston, or like a Mindy Diamond is out there, right? She's a big name in the space, but we know enough that to just ask the right questions, like, is this non-protocol protocol? Are you allowed a phone call to your clients? How many communications and what type are you allowed? That's where the legal compliance checklist becomes a really key component, because I think if we have the goals and then we have kind of the guardrails of what's set on us as marketing folks, that's really helpful, because then we can maximize the change and try to, if it is okay, we need to bring over as many clients as possible, but we can only reach out to them in this way, then we can form a strategy around that. So anyhow, yeah, I want to touch on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, right? Like, protocol firms, where you typically can bring over some basic information from your clients to the new firm and even communicate with them. It changes the way you market to them, versus ones that, like the non-protocol ones, where you literally are not even, you're worried about getting sued for even potentially talking
Right.
to the clients, right? And so you really have to think about like what you're going to do to lead up to it. So I mean, I think that's a good transition right into this like first step of the checklist, which is thinking pre-transition, like how do you maximize announcement communications once they happen? And so a lot of times we work with advisors, just like, what's your personal brand look like? What's your LinkedIn profile look like, right? Like, have you connected with all of your clients ahead of time?
Yeah.
Anticipating the change. Think about the distribution after the fact. If you can't email or call them, how are they even going to know that you transferred, right? Like, you don't want to put the entire boat in the hands of the firm that you're leaving in order to share the announcement of when you're leaving. So it doesn't seem like it would be a big aha moment for the advisors we worked with, but the entire idea of like having some sort of way to connect with your clients ahead of time so that they can then see the posts on your feed, whether it be LinkedIn or Instagram or wherever your clients are living. I think that's a really big point. And it's something that I think you put yourself in a good position, even if you're in a, you know, even if you're in a, I think I said earlier that the protocol is more, the protocol firms are the ones that you can communicate with. The non-protocol are the ones that are more restricted. Even if you're in a protocol firm and you're going to be able to contact them, it's still best to make sure that they can get every sort of possible hit from the marketing front as you can, right? So this is like one of the things that we say is just like build a plan for yourself to try to connect with all of your clients leading up to the transition so that at least you're connected with them on LinkedIn. You potentially, if you have a business account for Instagram or any of these other places, like there's a way for them to potentially see your media afterwards. Does that make sense, Steven?
Yeah,
You
exactly.
think?
I think one thing that I learned from one of the many things I learned from Boston during this was just how sensitive all this is, right? Like, I mean, this is to a
Yeah.
lot of these advisors, this is like their career. This is like their entire career they've built up. And it's very, there's a lot of risk involved if you misstep. It's very confidential leading up to this and so on. So it is, depending on the situation, you can do things to put yourself in a better position. I mean, some of these stories are wild. Like the day you leave, like one of these bigger wirehouse firms or whatever, there's an advisor who left Fidelity. The next morning, he was served, literally somebody came to his door and they'd issued him a cease and desist letter and they started suing him the day after, it just mostly, I think, as a scare tactic. So they're just, you have to be strategic as you navigate that. And again, I think for us, marketing and communications is one piece of that. The legal, the compliance, the transition consultant, such as Vantage Impact, would be another one that can like lead you all through this. But I just want to touch on that too, because you might, we've had situations where you can't make the phone call, you can't send the email. All you can do is build your presence, basically build a personal brand presence on the internet, and then hope that your clients will wake up after you leave and be like, oh, wait, where's John? He's not here. So I guess I'm going to Google his name. And then when they do that, hopefully your new website pops up or your LinkedIn profile or whatever it may be. So I think, it's that it can be that extreme, right? Where you literally will have no contact and they just have to use the internet to try to find you. And then it has to be their decision to come and follow you. So, depending on what that looks like, right? There's a strategy to put in place far in advance, even 6 months in advance, 9 months in advance of making the move. You can start to act on some of these things.
Yeah. And I think like if you're a firm that is working with an advisor and there's an agreement where they're going to come on, this is a really good counsel to be able to give to them. It's like not just connect with your current clients, which that's a harmless connection, right? Like we're not talking about like, hey, I'm going to be transitioning soon, like DMing them and then trying to connect. We're just saying, hey, connect. Hey, I'd love to connect with you on this platform, right? So that they are. I mean, that's not something that you can get yourself in trouble for.
Yeah.
But also understanding the way the algorithms work, it's like the individuals are not always going to see everything that you post, right? Unless they've been engaging with something before. So you really need to think about like ahead of time, what's some valuable content or what are some things that I can share so that the clients that I'm connecting with engage with my current content so that they're going to ensure that any sort of post communications where I'm talking about my new firm, whether it's, and we're going to talk about sharing a video or sharing some other like, content there, they're going to be able to see it, right? So you're kind of like, you're trying to build your personal brand ahead of time, even without any sort of knowledge about the transition so that you can put yourself in the best possible position to be seen afterwards.
Right. Yeah. Nice. Let me add one other angle to this. I think for clients that we work with, several of those, they're actively trying to recruit, right? So trying to bring, it could be, there's a variance of what they're looking for, but it could be a younger advisor who will come in and service, or it could be middle-aged advisor who's got a book, or, somebody who's looking for a succession plan. Could be any of those, or anywhere in between. But I think what we're going to talk through, um, there are some tactical things, but just on the whole, I think it's also important. How does marketing or communication support a move like that? These folks who were kind of playing the field, like shopping around, and your firm is one of the ones that they're considering that you're talking with. We have seen that, this, if you can demonstrate that you do have a strong marketing presence, you do have a strong brand, you do have, the power, you do have the capacity to support them from a marketing communication standpoint once they do join. That is a big selling point, because I think, as we continue to go to these conferences, people continue to listen to Kitsies, and so everyone is just saying, like, you have to have some marketing capacity behind this if you want to support organic growth. And if you're a firm that doesn't have that, or
Yeah.
you just haven't dipped your toe into that yet, I think it makes it a little bit harder for you to bring in a new advisor, because I think the smart ones especially are going to say, well, what's the marketing look like once I'm there? How are you going to help me, communicate to the clients, but then also how are you going to help me grow once I'm there? So anyhow, just to frame it up a little bit that way.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, one of the implicit consequences a lot of times of people marketing efforts to retail prospects actually end up generating a lot of talent acquisition opportunities, just because advisors that are really talented see the marketing efforts that you're doing, and that's part of what attracts them, right? So, it's kind of these funny, like, down the road, you may now be generating all sorts of potential prospects to bring in 1 million, 1 million, 1 million at a time. But that 100 million advisor who's ready to make a switch sees it over a year and then ends up reaching out, and you guys are able to come up with like a massive acquisition as a result of those marketing efforts. So it's just like one of these beautiful things about marketing, right? It's a gift that keeps on giving.
There you go.
I
The
would
gift that
say.
keeps on. Yeah, no,
Um,
those advisors could be seeing things like your core values, your team
yeah.
videos. They can get to know you as a brand, just the same way that a retail client prospect would, right? So, yeah, I think that's a good point. Okay. All right, let's jump into the
Okay,
tech.
so personal brand. So internal team communication, I think this is an important thing. Just thinking through, like, how's the advisor communicating with members of their own team if there's multiple people coming over, but also for the firm that's taking on the new advisor, like, what are all the communications look like internally? Like, just thinking through how that advisor is going to be announced internally, I think is just an important piece, right, of running a firm, and how to position that new acquisition or the new W-2 advisor. Like, just thinking through that as part of the checklist, I think is important. Um, okay, here's a big one, is just, now, this is envisioning that the advisor is going to be able to communicate with their clients, right? So, this is like assuming that protocol arrangement. One thing that we help advisors do is building out an FAQ, or a frequently asked questions document, that just thinks through every single possible question that their clients are going to ask. And so we help. It's really not. It's if you can email your clients, it's a very helpful thing to be able to send them, to anticipate all the things that they might be asking. And I'm thinking things like, you know, not just like, why did you join the firm? Like, why are you joining this new firm? Like, what inspired you to join? How will this new practice benefit you as a client? What are the key service and capabilities of the new practice that differentiates it? What are the new technology and resources that you're excited about? What are the things that that you're most excited about, right? And then specific, like, logistical things, like, how will my investment accounts, and, like, are there going to be any changes to client accounts? Like, if there is a new custodian, why are you making the change to the new custodian? Are there any changes to the fee structure? Will there be a tax liability when accounts are moved? What's an in-kind transfer? Everyone's talking to me about an in-kind transfer. All right. Whether or not you're, like, plugging into a TAMP and they're providing communications, like, I don't even know what that means. Are there going to be any fees to transfer the accounts themselves? What needs to be done with the account transfers, right? Like, am I going to get multiple DocuSigns versus a hard copy? And, like, thinking through all of that. How do I find the information for the new custodian? And, like, how do I get my login and password? And then, is there going to be a multi-custodial agreement? Like, what if I have money in other accounts? Like, will you manage that? I think all of that is really important for the advisor to have thought through and have like concrete answers for, not just in a document, but also to like have those talking points available for one-to-one calls if they are able to call afterwards and like announce whether or not they're starting a new practice or if they're joining a new firm. You need to have all that thought through, right? Especially if you have any sort of like possibility of retaining as many clients as possible. You need to have thought through all the different reasons why you join that new practice. And honestly, a lot of times the reason why you join that new practice is you're going to get a better payout, right? Or you're going to make more money overall. There's some sort of like financial agreement, but you got to frame it up to clients, right? In a little bit of a different way. You have to focus much more on how it's going to be better for them. And so that's a key part of, wouldn't think about that like necessarily as marketing, but that's a key part of client retention, is just having thought through all of those. And we've helped advisors do that a number of times, right, Stephen? Just kind of think through that whole document.
Putting them in the client first. You'll hear us talk about that, and it's easy to stray away from because we're excited about the change or whatever the different, the financial piece of it is, or the work-life balance piece or whatever. But always going back to the audience and what's in it for the clients. I think starting there is where we've got to stay focused on that. I'll just say too, some of the things you mentioned, depending on the custodian, the custodian will have a lot of materials that usually we could leverage, especially when you get into the administrative, operational type of things that an agency or a marketing person should be able to leverage. Some nice looking materials. I mean, they do this every day, right? So there's usually a lot of things that you can put into play for your team. And then, there's also consultants or third parties that will help you with that too. I know the name Greer Rubling sticks out to me. I think just because she's active on LinkedIn, I've seen her there. I've seen her work with Boston before. She's the founder of Advisor Transition Services. So she focuses on operational and administrative aspects of moving your practice, right? So there's, again, like you have legal, compliance, marketing, communications, and then this type of person can kind of fill in all the nitty gritty, there's a bunch of grunt work that goes into it that people like me cannot stand, but people like Greer apparently love. So, you could kind of,
now, I mean, all the, and just real quick, just like the custodial transitions, they never go like the way that they're going to go. Like they say they're going to go, right? They're always like, oh, this is going to be
easy peasy.
Seamless.
Yeah, no, we'll be done.
You just fill out
in a day.
Just fill out one of these spreadsheets and we'll just like throw it in our platform, and like all the clients are going to be great. And it just never,
no, expect the unexpected.
Just never, it's always much more complicated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It definitely is a big change. Yeah. Okay, so with that FAQ and like building out that FAQ, what you can do then is turn around and make a really nice announcement video. And this is why we work so hard on the personal branding front to make sure we're connected. Really nice a video that shares like why you're so excited, how it's going to benefit clients. You can really turn that around into a nice video. And so, we've worked with, like high quality video firms in the location of where our advisors are live and reside, and that they're transitioning, and kind of help them build out a script for, why they join the firm. I think, right, is a big component. If you're starting your own RIA, we tend to have more of a focus on not the transition itself, but more of like a long-term, like what you do as a firm. And you can sort of leverage that as part of your announcement that you're leaving. But if you're just joining a new practice, right? Or if you're a practice that's taking on a new advisor, it's really important to equip that advisor with that message for clients on like all those things that you work through with the FAQ document of why you're excited, the services and technology available to them, like how it's going to be such a better experience. Building that into a really nice, coherent video is something that, it can take on very variable levels of quality, but just having something that matches the message of what you've planned to do, I think is a super valuable component that can be distributed across the different social platforms or sent to clients or sent to your old clients if you're allowed to.
Nice.
I would say too, like the press releases are always like super valuable. It gives you another touch point, helping the firm, like the excitement of the acquisition, the bringing on the new advisor and why they're so excited. That's another great thing that you can get another touch point to send out in addition to the video. So we usually like to send the video out as like one post or one email, and then the press release out as another email. Again, like FAQ document, is a little bit more logistical. So it might need to be separated if you are emailing from one that's more of like a marketing video, but it can still be valuable to just have all these different touch points to try to make sure. Because remember, like, not everyone's going to see every email that you send, not everyone's going to see every post that you do. So having like multiple excitement type valuable videos can be, or I'm sorry, valuable touch points can be really helpful just for somebody seeing at least one of the messages.
Yeah, like you're trying to cast a wide net across channels for people, like for people to just come across it again across the internet, to put it broadly. So video,
Yeah.
PR, social, email, like wherever you can get to them via their computer. So yeah, I think also PR,
Yeah.
it just feels very credible and official, right? That's another piece of it. It's like you get a nice, you get a nice PR Newswire backlink. It might get picked if it's actually really interesting. If there's some kind of hook there, you might get picked up by a bigger publication. But even if not, it's like this credibility PR type of play. So it just it just looks official. That it looks like your firm is in control, right? And going through it, strategically. So. Yeah, that's another thing we've seen.
No, it's a really good point. The whole point you had too about like if it's a non-protocol firm, if you're not allowed to contact anyone and people are like trying to figure out what happened, they type in the advisor name, like the PR Newswire press release coming up, and then it being posted on the new firm website. It just helps them sort of like bridge the gap and potentially reach out, right? And try to follow the advisor over. So I think that's a really good point. I also would say too, like if you're a firm, very quickly after the transition, if not the day of, like having a plan to have a page up on the site with the bio and photos and like have all that arranged ahead of time. Because again, from like a searchability perspective, like having that already queued up where the name is your advisor's name is associated with the firm, Google can pick that up pretty quickly. So you have a PR Newswire, you have an article on the site about the person coming in, and you have the bio. It's like all of a sudden it's kind of overwriting on that behalf of the Google algorithm. And, with the AI search a little bit, a lot is queued up by the search results anyway. You're going to get a much better position of being found associated with the new firm. If you wait on that kind of stuff, it just provides even that like a little bit of confusion because, the firm that you have is like can't find the past advisor's name. And so you just want to make sure that you have all that cleared up so that it's very clear for clients that are searching. Okay. And then what we typically say too is just like social media posts afterwards. Like it's really nice to have some like, whether you're starting your own practice or, joining a new firm, just having some authorship of some post or something that you can share after the fact. So you get a lot of excitement about the transition, the new practice, the new video of them of you joining the firm. But then what's your follow-up going to be so that you can continue to keep hitting those clients, especially if they haven't transitioned yet or if they're in the process of transitioning. So that's something that we've helped advisors with, right? Like what's the 3 to 6 month plan even after you transition? I think when we first went through a couple of experiences, Stephen, we were so worried that like everything needed to happen the day after. We were like, oh my gosh, like all the clients got to be called. But then we realized, sometimes it can be a few weeks, few months after you talk to the whale, your most important clients immediately, but then the other ones can trickle in after the fact and it's not the end of the world. And so that's why you want to have more posts down the line to continue to engage so that you can put yourself in the best possible position to bring that 90%, 95%, 98% of your assets over.
Yeah. What if your clients are on vacation for 2 weeks when you make the move and they come back and they're not, they're not on their social feeds or whatever it is, if they're taking a true vacation and they come back, right? And then you got to have something there for that timeline too. So I think there's like a before, during, and after type of 3 phases you could think about. Before, maybe even 6 to 9 months, like we said, you should be prepping your LinkedIn profile, connecting with your clients in as many different ways as you can, right? Even email addresses, if that's going to be in play, but definitely like on LinkedIn or maybe you're on Instagram or Facebook and you can connect. And then during, which is the day of, like the launch day, and then after, like you said, even putting together like a 3, 4, 5 month plan would be really, really helpful so that you have some longevity to to the announcement for the people who, they're considering it. Maybe they didn't even see your first stuff when it went live, so gotta have something in place for those. If you're really maximizing it, thinking about it in those 3 phases, I think would be smart.
I love that. Then I think the last thing that we had talked about is we have helped clients just like personalize thank yous afterwards. For the ones that have followed you over to the new firm, I mean, it goes a long way just to have a little personal note. And you guys are, and everyone listening to this, like as an advisor, like you understand the value of the client relationships. You probably would have thought of that already, but that is one nice. I mean, there's services out there that we've examined that are more of like you can streamline like a lot of personalized notes that look like they're coming from the advisor, but at the end of the day, like you writing them actually makes the biggest difference, I would say, especially for your bigger clients. So just that nice little touch after they transition over, in the 3 to 6 months afterwards, I think goes a long way, right, Stephen? We've seen that help.
Yeah, again, like you said, I think the people listening to this probably could do a podcast episode to us on, how to
Yeah.
think through those or what they are. But we've seen a lot across the firms we work with on these kind of like personal touches, personal gifts, this kind of thing that, like you said, they go a long way. It takes a little bit more time. Usually it's more manual, but we're talking about personal, lifelong relationships here. So I think it's worth it. Right.
Yeah. One thing, it's just the last thing I think I would say is that like whatever the email with the key messaging points is, which is part of the FAQ document, right? Like it's so important to have just your talking points in front of you that can be reiterated over and over again for the reason why you're switching. But I would say that like we've put together these nice like mass emails to sort of help facilitate like a wider transition announcement. Um, but the best possible transition communications can be like when the advisor prints out a page with your main talking points and has individual phone calls afterwards, right? And just like shares, hey, this is why I'm moving. You have your points in front of you just so that you have like a little bit more assurance. But I think that like having that ready and then supplementing that with some of the video content, some of the other articles and the press release, I think is probably the best way to do it. With potentially like a thought of sending out a mass email as well that makes those points. So you can kind of just have to do this on a case by case basis, right, Stephen? Just like based on how the transition is going to go, how much you can communicate, and then, what your goals are.
Yeah. Spot on. Yeah. So hopefully this has been helpful. I think we touched on all the main pieces. Hopefully it's been helpful for, I think, 2 different groups. Like if you're an advisor at a wirehouse or broker dealer, or you're looking to make some kind of move, right? You're looking at a succession plan, some things that you could think of, but also for, the founders or managing partners of RIAs that are looking to acquire, or looking to bring in more advisors, from different places. Hopefully it's helped you think about how marketing communications could be a part of that. We're not saying it's going to drive the, drive the ship here, but it's, marketing communications can be a really important part of whether that change goes smoothly or not, and whether you maximize, kind of the business outcomes, I guess, right? If you're trying to move over a book, there's a lot of, these things are weighted, right? That's important. The amount of assets that you bring over, for example. So marketing communications, we've definitely seen can influence that. So yeah, hopefully it's been helpful to kind of talk through this framework. And again, we'll make the checklist available in the show notes. Anything else to add before we wrap up here, Faustin?
No, I think that's great.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for listening again. If you don't mind, give us a 5-star, give us a little 5-star rating, throw us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll be back next week with more. Thank you very much.